American poet Elaine Equi speaks of her relationship to postcards. The postcard is sacred to me. It makes me sad that no one sends them very much anymore because of email and texting. I still like to buy them, but they've lost their original function and now just seem like reminders or mementos of what they used to be. I will finish my message today with a word about postcards and at least one Jewish approach to postcards. And I want to reference 5 particular postcards written by Theodor Herzl, the founder of political Zionism, at a particularly important moment. We'll get there. But first, let's examine Herzl's all too brief life and extraordinary career. The mythic version that you and I know is that Herzl, an assimilated Viennese Jew, was sent to cover the 1894 Dreyfus trial in Paris, bearing witness to the anti-Semitism of the crowds. He experienced what you would call an aha moment when he realized that assimilation was not the answer and that Jews needed a place to call their own. He realized what others didn't even dream of, the need for a Jewish state that would cure the world of its anti-Semitism and rehabilitate Jews from their galut or exile mentality. Over the next 10 years, Herzl's life took on a frenetic pace, from Congress to Congress, from publication to publication, and meeting with anyone he could in order to forward his vision. Perhaps due to the pace Herzl kept, and perhaps due to his heartache over the debates on the Uganda plan, a sudden and fatal heart attack in 1904 felled this giant of a man mid-stride at the tender age of 44. That myth puts forward a tale of heroism wrapped in tragedy. It is a story that I largely bought into until I discovered a blog and a book by Herzl historian Professor Gil Troy. Professor Troy asserts that there is more to the story, much more. The flurry of activity that characterized Herzl's life and ultimately his legacy was prompted by forces far more heartfelt than merely his prescriptive recommendations for the Jewish people. As Troy explains it, having been trained as a lawyer, Herzl barely lasted a year as a low-level civil servant. To pay the bills, he turned to journalism, something he was good at, but his head was elsewhere. He was a dreamer, and his passion lay in writing literary projects and plays, none of which really caught fire. His marriage to Julie Naschauer served to stabilize his finances, but it was loveless and troubled. Their children, apparently the only thing that kept them together. Herzl's beloved and only sister, Pauline, died of typhus when he was a teenager. And apparently the love of Herzl's life, Heinrich Kahne, killed himself in 1891. As for Herzl himself, Troy explains, he lived for years with a foreboding awareness of his own impending death. Diagnosed with a heart condition in his 30s, he suffered from chronic heart palpitations. At 36 years of age, he had already written his will. explaining in his diary, "It is proper to be prepared for death. And I always feel the future peering over my shoulder." Not only was there nothing sudden or unexpected about Herzl's death, asserts Professor Troy, but an appreciation of Herzl's life requires that we consider that the reason Herzl wrote and worked like a man running out of time was that he knew that he was a man running out of time. He was a man who felt the Malach HaMavos, the angel of death, hovering constantly, relentlessly. As cultural anthropologist Ernest Becker explained in his 1973 Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Denial of Death, it is the awareness of our inevitable death that is the prompt to building character, culture, and legacy. Awareness of his mortality was not Herzl's only motivation. And the last 75 years of Israel's existence are testimony to the prophetic aspect of Herzl's vision. Professor Troy's point is simply that there is more at hand than Herzl's political intuitions. He was so acutely aware of the finite and indefinite length of his lifetime. And his passion was prompted by this awareness. And he insisted on using every second to leverage every moment of his fleeting life to build something that would outlast him. When we arrive at Yom Kippur, but really when we arrive at this moment of the Yitzkor service, we become acutely aware of the finite and indefinite span of our own lives against the expansive backdrop of eternity. The generations who have gone before, the generations who will follow. And our Machzor makes it explicit. It states that we are but a passing shadow, a fading cloud, a vanishing dream. But you, Hashem, are ever present, enduring forever. In the hands of the romantic, it is the juxtaposition between the passions of the moment and the eternity of the grave that gives life to every great love song and poem. In the hands of the purpose-driven soul, religious or not, it is the juxtaposition between our fleeting lives and the length of eternity that sharpens our vision, focuses our mission, and situates the calling of the day. As futurist Ari Wallach has recently written, the kittel, the white garment that I am wearing, is meant to remind us of our mortal condition. Indeed, I will wear it when I am buried. It has no pockets, as if to remind us that we can take nothing with us. We enter this world bare, and we leave it bare. The only question is, what will we leave behind for future generations? Which is why, at least in part, I believe we come together for Yitzkor. At Yitzkor, we're reminded that we are who we are because of those who came before us, those who gave of themselves so that we can be here now. One's deeds never occur in a vacuum. They have implications for the generations to come. Our Machzor teaches that God judges us not on the merits of our own deeds alone, but also on the merits of our ancestors, Zechut Avot. Or today we might say Zechut Avot ve'imahot. So too, on the other side of the ledger, merciful as God may be, the sins of one generation can be visited upon the next. Not an insignificant thought as we consider the responsibilities one generation has to the next in our ecologically fragile world. Some are granted length of years. Others are not. Some pass from this world having been granted ample time to prepare. Most do not. But no matter the length of our years, to be a Jew is to understand our lifespans as part of a much longer generational history. We are indebted to those who came before. We are obligated to those who will come after us. Human as it may be, to be hyper-focused on our own lifespan, to care only about our own length of years. As Jews, we know that the driver for our behavior is what Wallach calls transgenerational empathy, a long-term view that seeks to understand our role in and responsibility for the lives of those who will follow. As the saying goes, a society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they will never sit. The tragic tale of Herzl's life is instructive because it exemplifies the reality that we all know to be true, but rarely acknowledge and actualize in our lives. Our time is short, our length of years uncertain. As both descendants of past generations and ancestor to future ones, how shall we use our time? That is the question for all of us today. So yes, let us recall our loved ones, fathers and mothers, brothers and sisters, spouses, sons and daughters, those granted length of years and those taken far too soon. We love them in life. We mourn them in their passing. We use this time to reflect on the example of their lives and the memories we hold dear. We identify the trees that they planted for us in their lifetimes, trees whose fruit we enjoy today. Perhaps that tree that you think of now is something specific. The family they built, a passion of theirs that you maintain, a commitment they held close that you continue to this day. And it might be something a little harder to identify, an aspect of their character, a manner in which they lived that you now seek to make a part of how you live. The other day, I was speaking to a friend about his late father, and he shared that his life path could not be more different than his father's. But every day, my friend strives to greet each person he meets with the warmth the humanity, and the kindness that his father showed to everyone in his lifetime. I cannot think a better way to use this Yitzkor time than to consider the trees, those so many trees planted for us by others, whose fruit we enjoy, beneath whose shade we presently sit. And if you have time, if you are inclined to do so, I encourage you to think not just of the trees planted long ago, but about the seeds you are planting today. Ask yourself whether, given the limited length of years all of us are ultimately granted, are you living a life of transgenerational empathy, of concern for future generations? After all, one day, please God, a long time from now, our names will be evoked at Yitzkor. The choices we make now, shaping whether we ourselves will be remembered for a blessing. Of all of Herzl's diary entries, there's one that I want to hold on to. It is not political, it is personal. Herzl describes that as the Zionist Congress was called to order, he felt history in the making, the electricity in the room, and the feeling as he was elected president of the movement that would one day give rise to the Jewish state. Notwithstanding the historical significance of the moment, or perhaps because of it, at that precise moment, sitting at the presidential table, Herzl took out 5 postcards and wrote notes to his parents, his wife, and each of his 3 children. It was at that precise moment that Herzl chose to express gratitude to those who gave him life. It was at that precise moment that Herzl thought about those whose lives would follow his. That is what Yitzkor is all about. The Baal Shem Tov, the early Hasidic master, once explained that life itself is like a postcard. When one begins to write, one does so in large script, believing one has all the room in the world. And soon enough, however, one comes to realize that the space is limited and we have so much yet to tell. So we write smaller and smaller and try to cram it all in. Yom Kippur reminds us that the postcard, the canvas of our lives, is never as large as we would like to think it is. There is always more to be said. There's always more to be done. And yet, limited as the postcard may be, ultimately, it is sent to someone else. Always, and especially at this moment of Yitzkor, we note the postcards that we have in fact received. And now, as they did in their lifetime, we draft and craft the postcard of our lives as best we can, from strength to strength, from generation to generation. May their memories be a blessing. And please God, one day ours as well. Gemar Chatima Tova. Let's proceed to Yitzkor.